You have big dreams of losing weight and creating a healthy, joyful life. But you find yourself craving sugar, caught up in what the scale says, and diet hopping. Dieting is the old way of losing weight. And the good news is I'm going to give you a new way of eating so you can ditch diets for good and build a healthy relationship with real food. My name is Megan Olson, certified nutrition practitioner, creator of Skinny Fitalicious, and your host of the Dish on Diets show.
Hello, friends. Today we're talking about calorie counting your way to nowhere. Why some individuals, some of you, are calorie counting but have no results to show. Why you're using MyFitnessPal for 10 years, 3 years, 4 years, on and off, and have no results to show for it, which, by the way, you shouldn't be using MyFitnessPal or any tracking app for that long. It should be a short-term intervention to learn why you calorie count, but nothing changes with your body composition, nothing changes with your weight, or you calorie count and your weight does change, you do lose weight, but you don't keep it off. We're going to talk about this, and what I'm going to tell you today might surprise you. But before we dive into this topic, I first want to remind you that I'm still doing my cookbook giveaway 2024. This is what I'm doing every month. I announced the May and June winners in previous podcast episodes. We have a few more weeks left in July, so those who leave a review in July for the podcast will be entered to win my cookbook this month. In order for you to be entered to win, all you have to do is log into the Apple Podcast and leave a written review and a 5-star rating. There are only 2 written reviews so far for July, so you have a good chance of winning if you write in a written review. I will announce the July winner in an August podcast, so good luck to you, and thanks for all of the awesome reviews that you've submitted so far, gang. Okay, so I'm going to give you some straight talk today about why you're not seeing the long-term changes you want in your journey, even if you're like in MyFitnessPal or calorie counting and you've been doing this thing on and off for years. This may not be what you want to hear, but I'm going to tell you this with a dose of love. Everything comes with a dose of love, okay? So a lot of you are calorie counting your way to nowhere because you are not actually changing. You need to change in your journey. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're like, but I am changing. I'm calorie counting. I'm trying to be good, quote unquote. That's not what I actually mean. So quite a few of the women over 35 I've seen in my nutrition practice the last 10 years. I mean, I've worked with thousands of clients at this point. The clients I typically see are people who have calorie counted before or done Weight Watchers before. And they have gotten nowhere, or they're calorie counting their way to nowhere because they're not actually changing their behavior. So what do I mean by actually changing? When I say change your behavior, I mean you have to change the type of behavioral patterns you have in your life. Changing your perspective on things, changing your mindset on things, changing how you treat yourself, changing who you associate with in your life, changing your routine, changing how you pivot when stress and life happens, changing your attitude, changing how you set boundaries with work and other people, changing how you communicate your needs and asking for help, changing your habits. This is what I mean when I say you have to change behavior. You have to change. A lot of women over 35 I've seen just let life happen to them. And then they act like they are not in control of their lives. Life happened, this thing happened to me, and therefore I couldn't follow through with what I committed to doing. I couldn't do anything. I mean, come on. You couldn't do anything? Nothing? Not even just a walk around the block? My husband had this work event, and it was at a baseball stadium, and all they had was hot dogs. I couldn't get any protein. I couldn't stay in my calorie deficit. This event took me by surprise. Okay, this is the kind of stuff I hear all the time, so I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just highlighting it as an example. So listen, ladies, this is how life is. right? There's like all these things that are always popping up and it's totally unexpected. So first of all, y'all need to stop acting surprised when life happens. Like, we got to stop acting surprised. This is just how life goes, right? Second, you need to learn how to pivot when life happens. Pivot. What's the backup? What's the best thing you can do? Can you bring a protein shake and drink it on the way to the ballpark? Can you eat a meal with your protein before you go to the ballpark? What can you do? What is the backup plan for when life happens? Because it's always going to happen. Like, why do we think that just because we have a goal of losing weight that like suddenly life is going to stop? There's going to be this like perfect runway. Nothing's going to happen. No stress, no family stuff, no nothing. It's just going to be this perfect time because you want to lose weight. No, it doesn't work that way. And honestly, you're never going to maintain weight thinking that way because life is always going to happen. You're going to have to figure out and learn how to pivot. You have to change your behavior. So if it were me and I was going to a baseball event for my partner, I would be of the mindset of, okay, I'm going to this event tonight. It totally took me by surprise. What am I going to do? You know, it wasn't expected. So what's the best thing I can do to get my protein, stay full, and stay in my deficit? That would be what I would ask myself. And then I'd find the best thing that I could do. Most likely I would front load a lot of my protein in the day, get more in at breakfast and lunch, maybe do a larger protein afternoon snack, maybe even eat my protein before going to the ballpark. If I'm in a deficit, I might even, in all seriousness, I might even eat my dinner at home before going to the ballpark because I know the ballpark is not going to have things that necessarily work for me, that fill me up, make me feel great. Yeah, I could probably make it work at the ballpark and figure out something that's lower calories. Probably wouldn't be as satisfying as what's at home. But if I had a goal, I would probably do that. If my goal is to lose body fat and I want to be in and out of a calorie deficit as quickly as possible to get the results and be out of that land, I would take it seriously, and that would be what I would do. Because when I have a goal, and this is just me personally, but when I have a goal, I take it very seriously. And some women over 35 don't treat their weight loss seriously. Yes, some of you, you're not treating your goal of getting healthier and losing weight seriously. You're treating it like, this is probably not going to work anyway, so why should I bother trying? Life is just happening to me. See, life is just happening. I can't do anything, right? I mean, you can do all the right things, quote unquote, and I'm saying right with air quotes, and I know you can't see me when I do that, but you can do all the right things. You can like count your calories, but you're not actually changing your behavior, right? So you can get your steps, you can get your protein, you can, count your calories all day long at MyFitnessPal and work out all day long every week, do your same routine. But then when life happens and you let life take over and you do not control your decisions, or you don't make choices that align with your goals, then reaching your goals becomes pretty impossible. Recently I had a client whose mom went into the hospital, and this kind of stuff happens with my clientele a lot because my clientele is 35 and up, and we've got aging parents, right? Some of my clients are caregivers. And this particular client, her mom went into the hospital unexpectedly for several days. And she figured out very quickly that the hospital didn't have much lean protein. So guess what she did? She packed a cooler. She brought lean protein to the hospital. She brought her meals to the hospital, stayed in her deficit, still tracked her calories while at the hospital, while dealing with her mother's situation. A lot of women over 35 in that scenario would have said, screw it. Screw it. I can't do anything. I'm so stressed out. See, this is why I can never lose weight. I have nothing to eat. These things keep happening to me in life, so I can't lose weight. Now, the only difference between those of you who say screw it when life happens and stress happens and my client is that you are believing your own excuses. You're not changing. You believe you have no control, which isn't true. That's you're believing your own excuse that you have zero control in this scenario, which is not true. You need to learn to take control. You are expecting that life is just going to be perfect and work around you and this goal that you have. Nothing's going to get in the way. You get stressed and turned upside down when life happens in your life. What do you think that's telling you? Maybe you need to learn how to be more resilient to stress. It's always going to happen. You're never going to stop these things in life from happening to you. So you have to learn how to pivot when things happen. What's the backup? What can you do? What's the best action item you can do? How do you take control in a situation where you feel helpless and out of control? I mean, do you stop brushing your teeth if your mom goes in the hospital for some kind of medical thing? Do you stop combing your hair? Do you stop washing your face? Do you stop showering? Do you stop washing your clothes? Of course not. So why would you not get your protein? Why would you stop staying committed to your goal of taking care of yourself? There's never going to be a perfect runway in your life for you to just lose weight where life won't get in the way. And it's not practical. It's not how life is. Life is going to get in the way during maintenance and during the time when you're trying to lose weight. So no better time to learn how to pivot than when you are trying to lose weight, so you can learn how to take care of yourself and live your life so that when maintenance comes along, you don't totally sabotage yourself. Know what I mean? You have to change in this journey if you want permanent change. This is the part of weight loss that is hard. Really hard. And it's the behavioral side of weight loss that I believe is not spoken about enough. Everyone focuses on the food. What food should I eat? How many grams of protein should I get? What are the protein sources that are the best? How do I get my fiber? How much fiber do I need? How do I get all the snack foods and all the junk foods out of my diet? And how do I reduce my alcohol? What are my calories? What are the best calories? What are the best foods? That's all only going to get you so far, because you have to change in this game. You have to make some short-term sacrifices too to reach a goal. You have to be willing to compromise to take care of your health. You have to sometimes be willing to be creative to take care of your health, ask for help to take care of your health. You may even have to say no to things. What a concept. You're not going to be able to say yes to everything anymore because you have a goal. Some of you don't treat it that way. When I was losing my 80 pounds in 2009, I could no longer be the person I used to be. The person who would just come home on a Friday night and be like, I'm just going to order a pizza and sit on the couch all night and just scroll on social media and watch the Kardashians. I couldn't do that anymore. I had a goal. I was also traveling as a consultant Monday through Thursday every week. I had to say no to going out with my coworkers to drink and have dinner several nights of the week so I could get my sleep and get my steps in. Most of the time, I set a boundary. Once or twice a week, I'd go out with them, if that. But most of the time, I had to say no. I had to bring backup lunches to work when I knew we were having all-day team meetings in case the type of food they brought in didn't work for me and my goals. I had to have a backup. I had to get up early sometimes and get my steps and exercise in the morning instead of at night, because sometimes we had late night meetings, late night trainings. I had to change, and I had to learn how to pivot. I had to learn how to look ahead and plan ahead. Those were things that were not always things that I did before. Those are ways I had to change. I also had to give up a very important friendship in my 80-pound weight loss journey. I had a best friend who always wanted to go out drinking. She wanted to go to the bars and go dancing until 2 a.m. on the weekends. She was going through a divorce, and I guess I would call kind of like a midlife crisis at that point in her life. And when she went through all of this, she just wanted to go out even more. And I started saying no to her because I didn't want to do that. That did not align with my weight loss goal. It also made me feel like crap. And I didn't want to feel like crap anymore. That was the whole point of me getting healthier. I started telling her no. And guess what? She didn't like it because I was different. I wasn't the same person anymore. And it caused a huge problem in our relationship. And we are no longer friends to this day. I had to give up my best friend because she was living a lifestyle that did not align with this new healthy and fit version that I was becoming. So the question becomes, are you willing to look at your life and give up certain things? I think some of you are trying to live your life the same old way that you've always done and lose weight, but you are not actually transforming if you are living your life the same way. How you have been living your life is partially why you're overweight. It's not just because you're mindlessly over-consuming calories. It's how you're living your life. You can no longer be that person. You can't. Routines, habits, mindset, behaviors, relationships, communication all must change potentially. You have to be willing to make short-term compromises, short-term sacrifices. You have to be willing to say no to things that no longer serve you and your goal. There are routines I guarantee you are doing right now that are interfering with your goal. There are behaviors you are doing right now that are interfering with your goal. There are relationships you are participating in right now that are interfering with your goal. All of this stuff is keeping you stuck. And your unwillingness to compromise, say no, and pivot is exactly why you are not where you want to be and why a lot of women are calorie counting their way to nowhere or using MyFitnessPal for years on and off because of this, because they're not actually looking at their behavioral patterns, relationships, communication, habits, all of that stuff, and actually changing. Like, think about this. Like, if you had any goal in your life, like if you were going to go back to school to get a master's degree, what kind of things in your life would have to change in order for you to do that? I'm 100% certain there are things that would have to change. If you had a goal of running a marathon and you knew in order to reach that goal of running a marathon, you had to get like 3 runs in over the next 2 weeks with X amount of miles in each run, would you be like, oh, I was going to do it, but then we were on vacation and then some family came to visit and then I had this event for my husband and then I had this thing with my mother come up, so I didn't do any of it. I mean, if you had a goal, you have to figure out how to make things happen while life is going on. If you're on vacation, you may need to get up earlier than your family to get a run in because you have a goal. If your husband has an event, you may need to go do your run the night before at the gym instead of outside, instead of the day you planned it for. You have to learn to think ahead and plan ahead, otherwise it will not happen. No one can do that for you. You have to learn how to change and how to look ahead and how to pivot for yourself. When I get my gray hair colored, it's a process because I have a lot of thick, long hair. So I'm usually at my hairdresser for about 3 hours. And it's typically something I plan over my lunch hour because of my work schedule. You know what I do? I pack a lunch. When I travel somewhere, you know what I do? I pack individual protein packs with individual oatmeal packs that are just oats. And I bring that so that I can have a protein-focused breakfast in case wherever I'm going doesn't have something that aligns with me and what I need. If I'm getting on an airplane to travel, I'm bringing a high-fiber wrap with me and some kind of lunch meat or a tuna pack with fruit, a jerky stick, and a string cheese. Then I get to the airport and I look for individual mustard packs and individual chips. I do not get on an airplane and go, oh my God, I'm starving, and then eat like a jerk when I get off the plane. I plan. I pivot from my normal routine because I don't want to be a starving bitch on a plane. I know what hangry will do to me when I get off that plane if I do not fuel my body. You have to plan. You can no longer be this fly by the seat of your pants kind of person. You can't leave things to chance anymore when you have a goal. A lot of women really suck at this. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying you suck at it because you haven't practiced it and nobody has probably pointed it out to you. And all you're focusing on is like, well, if I could just count my calories, if I could just do this thing. It's like, no, but you have to change. It's not really like you have to do the calorie thing. It's like you have to actually change. Think ahead, plan ahead, look ahead, have a backup plan, pivot. Learn how to be okay with taking action that is different from how you take action when you are at home and not freaking out, not having stress and anxiety like this is different from when I'm at home. It's probably not going to work, right? I mean, you would not believe the number of women I have spoken to throughout the years who get back from vacation and tell me it took them 2 weeks to get to a grocery store. I am baffled by this. Like, what are you eating? Pop-Tarts and Cheetos for 2 weeks? What are you feeding your kids? Nothing? Sorry, kids. I'm back from vacation. I've got vacation hangover. Can't feed you for 2 weeks. I mean, if you're going on vacation, what's your plan for coming home? What things are in your freezer and pantry that you can build an adult meal for and a child-friendly meal for until you can get some groceries? How about ordering grocery delivery and have them delivered to your house so when you get home, they're there? I mean, I can't tell you how often I suggest these things to clients and they're like, oh, I never thought of that. Exactly, because you have to change. You have to think differently. That's the whole point. You need to be different. You need to think different. You can't be like your old self. You can't think like your old self. You can't be the same way you've always been and think somehow you're going to lose weight, be healthy, and keep weight off all until you're 85 years old. You have to change your behavior. You can't avoid this. You can't participate in the same behavioral patterns that you've always participated in and keep any weight you lose off. Most likely, those behavioral patterns are exactly why you need to lose weight in the first place. You see, it's these things, ladies, that make weight loss hard because it requires you on some level to change your behavior, to change your patterns. I mean, life is always going to happen. Stress is always going to happen. When has life happening mean that we don't get anything done? I mean, you just don't do anything. Sorry, life happened. My mom was in the hospital, couldn't pay my mortgage. Do you call your mortgage company and you're like, my mom was in the hospital the last 2 weeks. Sorry, I'm just super stressed out. Haven't had a chance to get my bills. So I'm not paying my mortgage. It's going to take me about 2 months to pay my mortgage. I mean, you don't do that. No, you figure out how to make it happen. You figure out how to pay your bills, right? It's like anything that's important in your life, you figure out how to still make something happen. You can't get your 10,000 steps in because something happened. You figure out how many steps you can get in or what can you do. You don't just say, screw this, I can't do anything, which is where a lot of people are because you're not actually changing. You're just like, oh, this thing happened, can't do anything. These are excuses, and a lot of people don't like to be called out on these excuses, but they really are excuses. And this is what I mean. This is the hard part of weight loss, because you have to be able to take an honest look at your life, an honest look at your behavioral patterns and say, what things are sabotaging me? What things are serving me? What do I need to change? How do I need to change? How do I need to be different? What relationships need to change? You need to do that inner stuff, and that's a hard thing to do. Believe me, I was there. I know it's hard. I had a client a while back who was working on her calorie deficit, but she kept taking trips and had friends in town. And she would come to coaching calls complaining how she was never losing body fat. And it was because she was not in a calorie deficit. She kept going over her calories, going out to eat on all these trips. And when her friends would come, and she was way under eating protein because she wasn't planning ahead for it. And the only time she looked at her calories was right before her call. So she never really knew where her calories were on average. She just knew that, she was doing the things. I'm calorie counting, but she was calorie counting her way to nowhere because she wasn't actually changing. So, her response to me was, I've counted calories before, Megan. I've told you I've done this before and it never works. You know what I told her? Your deficit isn't the problem. It's you. You are the problem. Your behavior has to change. You need to treat your goal seriously, and you need to make some short-term sacrifices and compromises to reach your goal. You're going out with friends, great. Maybe you eat at home before you go out with them so you can control your calories while you have this goal. Maybe you don't drink when you go out with your friends. Maybe you skip the alcohol. Maybe you offer to cook for your friends when they're visiting so you can control the calories better. I think a lot of women are in this camp. They think the calories are the problem or the food is the problem or, I'm calorie counted all the time and calories never work for me, when really it's their own behavior that is the real problem. They are not changing their behavior, and they're not willing to take an honest look at their behavior and say, this stuff that I'm doing doesn't align with my goal. I need to make some changes. Kind of like I mentioned with my friend, right? Like I had to break up with a friendship, a really good friend of mine, because I couldn't do that anymore and still reach my goals, unfortunately. I mean, your behavior has to change in order for you to achieve the results that you want. And there will be some temporary sacrifices, some temporary compromises required. I think some women don't really maybe want to make those sacrifices, but that's just true of any goal. I think one of the issues that quite a few women get into is that they've been in this diet mentality. And I have a whole podcast where I talk about the diet mentality. They've been in a diet mindset for a very long time, tracking calories for a very long time. How about we spend a very long time just living at maintenance? Like, do you even know what your maintenance calories look like? Do you even know like what habits you should be focusing on during maintenance? If you don't know any of that, and you've been struggling like for a long time, and you kind of sound like some of the women I'm talking about today, maybe it's time for you to shift gears and spend a long time working on just maintenance, healing your relationship with food. Because I think when we hear like, I have to make sacrifices to lose weight, we get into these cycles where we're like constantly saying, this is good food, this is bad food. You just have a terrible relationship with food. And so you're never really in a deficit, but you're always in a mindset of like, I have to cut these things out. Whereas that's not what we need to be doing. What we need to be doing is learning how to eat all things in moderation within your maintenance, just to maintain your weight now. That helps you heal your relationship with food. And then when you go into your deficit, that should be the only time frame where you're making a temporary sacrifice. But people are like constantly trying to diet, so it constantly feels like you're exuding so much willpower because you are relying so heavily on willpower to say no to the foods that you think are bad. There's no one food that makes you fat. But learning what maintenance looks like and getting really consistent with your foundational habits and healing that relationship with food, not seeing food as good and bad anymore, just allowing those fun foods in your diet, but within some boundaries, right? It's not a free-for-all. You don't eat like a jerk, right? You're putting some boundaries by learning what your maintenance looks like. And I think if some women spent the time to do that, the calorie deficit for fat loss part would be tremendously easier. And I've actually cranked down on this with quite a few of my clients because I've had quite a few clients who just like want to jump right into fat loss. And I'm like, you're not ready. We need to do this first. I mean, anytime you have a goal, you're going to have to make some changes and sacrifices. But like I said, a lot of people are in kind of like this dieter's mindset. So that means we need to like kind of look at that and say like, is now the time to be in a deficit or is now the time to be working on maintenance? But let's say you are ready to be working on your calorie deficit, right? You got to treat it seriously. You've got to make some short-term sacrifices. You're going back to school for a master's degree, like I mentioned earlier. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. You're going maybe to get a second job to pay off some bills. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. You're running a half marathon. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. You're remodeling your home. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. You're starting a family. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. You're starting a business. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. Whatever your goal is, there is going to be some temporary sacrifices for you to reach that goal. But for some reason, when it comes to losing body fat, we don't look at it that way. Why women think that when they have a goal of losing body fat that there won't be temporary sacrifices, it kind of blows my mind because it seems pretty obvious with any other goal, no matter what it is. And I do believe some women think what they are doing while they're in the deficit to lose body fat is what they're going to be doing forever. And that's how they're going to maintain their weight. They think like if their calorie deficit is 1,200 calories, they're like, this is all I'm going to get the rest of my life. 1,200 calories is my calorie deficit. This is obviously going to be my maintenance too. That's wrong. Your calories need to come up after maintenance. There needs to be an exit plan out of your deficit. Calories always have to come back to wherever your new maintenance is. But a lot of women mentally are like, 1,200 calories is my deficit. Obviously, this must be all I'm going to get the rest of my life. Oh my God, that feels miserable. No wonder you don't ever want to execute. Because you have a misunderstanding of how it's all supposed to work, right? So if you're constantly thinking, I got to restrict calories forever, I got to count calories forever in order to keep weight off forever, no, you are wrong and you are misinformed. First of all, tracking calories is a tool to help you reach a goal. You should not be tracking calories for the rest of your life. You would be a psycho if you're doing that. Second, being in a calorie deficit is not the amount of food you eat in maintenance. I explained this in a previous podcast episode about energy balance and whether or not, if you're in a calorie deficit, you can't lose body fat. I explained it in that podcast episode. So I'll link that podcast episode back in the show notes because I think some of you would benefit from going back and listening to that episode where I explained the difference between maintenance and a calorie deficit. You get more calories in maintenance. And if you don't exit a diet and bring your calories up, you're going about this the wrong way. And not bringing calories up is a dangerous thing for thyroid, and it's a recipe for your metabolism to downregulate. This is an issue a lot of women who have been dieting chronically for a long time run into. I've seen it a lot. But in a fat loss phase, a dedicated fat loss phase, whatever the time frame is, expect to have to make some sacrifices. You can't be the version of who you are right now who doesn't make any sacrifices, no compromises, and changes nothing. I have seen this quite a bit with clients and have to talk to them about not just focusing on food, but focusing on changing their behavior. And it's really fascinating because when things in life happen, we act so surprised, even by the most basic cyclical things like, oh my God, my kids are home from school. It's the summer. Oh my God, my kids are back in school. It's the fall and my routine's different. Oh my God, I'm on vacation. Oh my God, I'm back from vacation. Oh my God, it's winter and it's cold out. How do I get my steps? Oh my God, it's the holidays. Oh my God, it's summer and it's humid and I can't get my steps because it's so hot outside. Like a lot of these things just happen every year. But we act surprised that they're happening to us when we're trying to lose body fat. Like, you didn't anticipate these things happening. They happen every year. I mean, I can understand not anticipating a family member going into the hospital and being ill, but some of these things, come on, they happen every year. Stop acting surprised when life happens and start planning. Start pivoting. You have a goal. Take it seriously. Plan. Have a backup. How do you do the best you can so you can still live your life and reach your goals? Notice I said best you can. Do not misinterpret me for be as perfect as you can. I said best you can. You can't go for a 1 hour walk like you normally do. Okay, can you just walk around the block or walk around your house? Something is better than nothing. What is the best you can do? In January 2014, I broke my right foot, my right heel. Oh my God. It was the most painful thing ever. I was in a boot for months. I swear my foot took forever to heal. And in April of 2014, my mom calls and says she's having emergency surgery tomorrow for 6 bypasses. They did a calcium score test on her and rushed her to the hospital. And she told me, Megan, don't come home, because she lives in Wisconsin and I live in Arizona. She knew I had a broken foot. She's like, Megan, you have a broken foot. I'll be fine. Well, I knew she wouldn't be fine. My dad was showing some signs of dementia. We didn't know exactly what was going on with him at the time. He kept saying, I'm just getting older and being forgetful. And so we didn't know he had dementia at the time, but my mom and I knew something was wrong with him. And my brother was never really around, so I knew I needed to be in Wisconsin in case something happened, especially something medical happening to my mother, because I didn't think my dad would be able to comprehend what was going on and handle it. So guess what I did? I got on a plane to Wisconsin, and it was a good thing I did too, because my mom caught a very rare infection in the surgical room. It took a dozen specialists to come in and figure out what was wrong with her. And she was in the hospital for 14 days. So if you're not familiar with cardiac patients, typically you're in the hospital maybe 3 to 5 days, but they pretty much get you out of there pretty quickly. They want you to get home. So for my mom to be in the hospital 14 days, that was a very serious thing. And so here I'm thinking, I'm just going to be coming to Wisconsin for a week, and I ended up almost being there for 3 weeks. And my dad could not understand anything that was going on. He couldn't keep up with the medications, the doctors, the tests they were running. And I very clearly recall when my mom was being discharged, the discharge nurse that was going over everything for home health care needs and setting up the nurse, because my mom had to have a catheter and all this stuff for this infection she got. And my dad, I remember very clearly, he turned around at me at one point and threw his arms up in the air. And I knew at that moment something was very seriously wrong with my father. That was not my dad. He wasn't comprehending or following anything the nurse was saying. And it wasn't very hard to understand. I mean, it was a lot, but it was pretty basic stuff, get this set up and call this person. And my dad just couldn't grasp anything that was going on. So it was a few months after that, when my mom recovered from her surgery, that I really pushed her to get my dad tested. And we did find out that he had early onset dementia. He was 62 when he was diagnosed, and he passed away last year in 2023 at 71. So obviously I was caught off guard by all this. My mom getting sick, spending 3 weeks in Wisconsin, my father not acting like himself, and I had a broken foot. What do you think I did? Do you think I ate like a jerk? Ate hospital food? Didn't pay attention? Didn't plan? Didn't exercise? Didn't do my physical therapy? Of course not. I went to a gym when I was in Wisconsin, and I told them, I'm only going to be here a few weeks, less than a month. And so they signed me up for a monthly membership. So I got my butt up early every morning to go work out so I could get to the hospital mid-morning and spend the day with my mom and see the specialists that were coming in and out, because I knew my dad couldn't keep up with what was going on. Most of the workouts I was doing was swimming and doing upper body strength training because I had a broken foot. I also got my butt to the grocery store, and I stocked the fridge at my parents' house full of lunch meat, bags of salads, pre-roasted vegetables, fruits, yogurts, eggs. I packed food in a cooler to bring to the hospital. I mean, I had zero desire to eat hospital food, and honestly, I was appalled by the food they were feeding my mother after an open heart surgery. I couldn't believe how unhealthy it was, so I pivoted. Was it perfect? Was it how I ate at home? No. But I had the mindset that I still needed to take care of myself no matter what was happening. And I figured out how to do the best I could, how to still make something happen instead of nothing happening. There's going to be a lot of situations like this one that I just described. This is probably a little more extreme, but there's going to be a lot of situations in your life where you will need to learn to pivot. Life is going to happen. Stress is going to happen, always. Stop acting surprised when it happens. Always have a backup. Always be thinking, what are you going to do that's good enough? And realize this is the real behavioral change you need to work on and practice to get the permanent change you keep saying you want. Being in a calorie deficit to lose weight is very straightforward. It's all this life stuff that makes it very hard, because the life happening means you have to change. You need to learn to pivot. Your life isn't going to change for you and your goal and clear the runway for you and your goal. You must change. In some ways, you will have to change permanently. In other ways, you will have to make compromises and sacrifices temporarily to reach your goal. I just had a client tell me the other day she was going to a barbecue, and she was like, I just know my friend. I knew she wasn't going to serve a lot of lean protein at this barbecue, and sure enough, she didn't, right? She had some desserts. She had like a cheese platter, which cheese is not very high protein, right? She's like, so I ate protein before I went to the barbecue. This is what I mean. Like, you have to change. In some ways, you're going to have to change permanently, like me breaking up with my friend, like me trying to get protein, like no matter what the situation, like my client trying to get her protein before going to a barbecue. Like, those are ways you're going to have to potentially change permanently. In other ways, you will have to make short-term compromises and sacrifices temporarily to reach your goal. You have a goal. You have to take it seriously. If you put in a serious effort over a 3 or 4 month or 6 month period of time, you will not get the results you want. And you're going to be like playing these mental gymnastics of like, I know what to do, but I'm never doing it, or it's never working out for me. Like, you have to put in the A or B effort the best you can. Like, when I'm in a calorie deficit, it's only for a few months that I'm in a calorie deficit. I have to make sacrifices, and I know that. Like, I rarely go out to eat when I'm in a calorie deficit. I'm very choosy about going out to eat, about going out with friends, and I eat a lot of the same meals repeatedly. I also go to bed early to make sure that I'm getting my sleep. But Megan, it's too boring to eat the same meals over and over again. I couldn't possibly eat the same meals on repeat. Well, first, why are you looking for your meals to entertain you? Why is food your hobby? Maybe we need to find some hobbies or some things that fulfill us outside of food. Food is meant to be enjoyed, so don't get me wrong, but it's not meant to be your hobby or entertainment. You can find things that satisfy you, but it doesn't have to be like the best meal ever every Tuesday night, right? I think that we have to kind of balance, like, if it's boring versus consistent. Like, if it's something you can repeat, it takes the mental effort out of you having to think about food so much. Like, a lot of women I work with say they don't want to have to think about food so much. Well, if you put things on repeat that you actually enjoy, you know what? You can be more consistent and you don't have to think about food as much. That's the balancing act. But here's the thing. You have to spend times finding meals that satisfy you and still help you get to your protein goals and calorie goals. I have spent a lot of time, early on when I was losing weight, trying out different meals, practicing different recipe combinations. I have found a lot of things that I really do love, and all I do is slightly reduce the portion when I'm in a deficit. So the foods I eat in a deficit versus when I'm in maintenance, they don't change. It's just the quantity that change. But the question becomes, have you found foods and meals that you love and enjoy and that satisfy you, that get you your protein, your fiber, some fruits and vegetables that are within your energy requirements? If you haven't done that yet, you need to spend some time over there practicing that before trying to be in a deficit, because it will make your deficit way easier. And I also, when I'm in a deficit, I take the goal of tracking very religiously. Like, I track religiously every day. Nothing goes in my mouth before I track it. And I mark off all the days on a calendar that I track when I'm in a deficit, so I can monitor my consistency with my tracking. I monitor all my data, and I don't wait until I have a meeting with a coach to review it. I look at my average calories, my average steps, my average protein, my average fiber several times a week. I'm looking at that. Like, if I start a deficit in May and it's July 15th, I'm looking at my averages since May all the way through July 15th. Where are my averages at? Because that's what my metabolism cares about. I take measurements regularly. I take photos, and I sometimes pay attention to the scale. But because I don't have a lot of weight to lose, I don't really put a lot of stock into it. So the other thing I just want to mention too is that I have observed some women sign up for coaching thinking because they signed up for coaching that their coach is going to change them. My client, Robin, who was just on the last podcast, actually talked about this, that she thought I was going to have like some magical potion to like help her lose weight. Or at least she was hoping for it. But I think some women have this perspective too. They think that because they sign up for coaching that their coach is just going to magically change them. Your coach or nutritionist can't change you. They don't have a magical fairy dust, unfortunately, to sprinkle on you. Believe me, I wish that I had it, because it would make my job so much easier. But the bottom line is, it is your goal. No one is forcing you to change, and no one is forcing you to have this goal, but it's your responsibility to change. It's your life. You have to live your life, not the coach. Your coach can't do the work for you. You have to do the work. Part of this journey is you have to take your control back, no longer allowing everyone in your life and everything in your life that happens to you to rule your choices and decisions. Learn how to say no. Learn how to set boundaries. Learn how to communicate where you need help, whether it's from your partner, work, friends, or family. I've literally had clients realize during our coaching that they needed to get a new job because their job was making their life miserable. They couldn't take care of their health. Their health was deteriorating because of their job. They literally went out and got new jobs. I've had people get divorces, not because of me, but just because they realized that their husbands were not supportive of their goals. Anytime somebody says to me, my husband doesn't support me getting a coach or spending money on myself, I'm like, you should probably divorce that guy, because he doesn't really care about you if that's how he's treating you. I know that's hard to hear, but I've seen it with clients. And unfortunately, these like real life things, guys, can really interfere with you taking care of your health and losing some body fat. And I know what you're thinking, like, this is really hard to do. It's really hard to say no, to set boundaries, to communicate with my partner and my work and my friends and family. Of course it's hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it. This is the part of weight loss that I said earlier is really, really hard. You have to change your behavior. Changing behavior is hard. getting out of self-sabotaging patterns, no longer believing your own excuses, no longer acting like a victim, taking control of your life. Yep, all hard. I'm not diminishing that. It was hard for me in my journey too. And I have tremendous admiration for anybody who is going through this journey and working on these things in their life, because it's not easy. But real change, guys, isn't just about focusing on food and counting calories or whatever we're doing these days. Many women are calorie counting their way to nowhere or using MyFitnessPal for years and decades, but they're not actually changing. They're not actually taking control of their life. Life is always going to happen. Stress is always going to happen. And for some women, I do question, if they're really committed to the goal of losing weight and getting healthier as much as they say they want it. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years and gosh, human behavior is quite fascinating. I wish I could get a job where all I do is study human behavior, because it's just incredible to see the stuff that people convince themselves of and the stuff that feels real, that's not really true, that people will be like, this is totally true. A lot of the women over 35 I've worked with in my nutrition practice, they just want to focus on what food's good and bad and what are my calories. And, if that's you, keeping weight off long-term until the day you die is going to be tough, if not impossible, if you only focus on food and calories, because in this game, you actually have to change. You can't just change eating and change the foods you eat. You must change your behavior in some way. And like I said earlier, some changes are going to be permanent. Some changes are going to be temporary while you're in a fat loss phase. But in order for you to do any of this, you are going to have to sit down and get brutally honest with yourself. That level of honesty is something some individuals are not willing to do, because it stings a little to admit to yourself that you're actually the problem. You're actually the one getting in the way of your goal. It's not the calories. Like, I can't tell you how many calorie counters, women have talked to me and told me they've tried. I tried this calorie tracker. I've tried this calorie counter. It told me this calories. I tried this calories. And I'm like, it's not the calories. You're the one getting in the way. Some way, somehow. You're probably getting in your own way. A while ago, I had a conversation with a client that I was working with who was doing a ton of cardio. And when I say a ton of cardio, I'm talking about like 3 hours a day. And she kept complaining to me. I mean, when she first started working with me, she's like, I'm hungry all the time. And I really don't look like I work out, but I work out all the time and I'm hungry all the time. And I explained to her how cardio was making her hungrier and that she really needed to scale back on the cardio if her goal was losing body fat. She needed to make a compromise and a sacrifice and scale back on the cardio so we could control her hunger. But Megan, you don't understand, she said. I love cardio. How can you tell me I should cut back on my cardio? This is healthy. I mean, for 2 months, this went on. And every time she came to a coaching call, she would talk about how she was so confused she wasn't losing weight when she really wasn't able to control her calories, and how she wasn't willing to, sacrifice her cardio. I mean, we kept having this conversation for 2 months. And then finally, one day, I said, okay, here's your deficit. Let's see how you do. Guess what? After 2 weeks, she realized she really needed to cut back on cardio, because she couldn't stay in the deficit with doing all these cardio. You know what I told her? I said, you have to change your behavior some way. There's going to be some sacrifice or compromise to reach your goal. You're going to have to make some permanent changes. You're going to have to make some temporary changes. Scaling way back on your cardio temporarily is one of the behavioral changes you need to make. You can't keep doing what you've always done, especially something that is directly sabotaging your hunger, and expect that somehow magically you're going to get to this goal. It doesn't work that way. Some sacrifice or compromise is required. Some change is required. That's what I told her. She finally came around, but this is what I mean. What's really fascinating about human behavior is that people are so unwilling to get outside of their comfort of what they've always done. And, I've literally seen some people refuse to believe, the scientific evidence and the truth of what I've been telling them, and they just sabotage themselves. And this is where, people are just calorie counting their way to nowhere. They're just getting nowhere. Either you're not taking the goal serious or you're not actually changing your behavior. Bottom line. So I think now is a good opportunity for you to do some self-reflection. Take a minute and ask yourself, are you making compromises? Are you committed to your goal? Are you taking it seriously? Are you actually changing your behavior to become an upgraded version of yourself? Changing behavior isn't just counting calories and eating your protein and fiber and getting your steps. Real change comes from being able to pivot and changing the patterns and routines in your life that aren't serving you, communicating where you need help and support, setting boundaries, learning to say no, and standing up for yourself, learning to pivot when life happens. So think to yourself, what behaviors do you need to change? How do you need to get better at pivoting? Get brutally honest with yourself. It's okay. We all have things to work on. It's not a reflection of like you being a good or bad person. You're only a bad person if you run over your neighbor's dog on purpose, right? We all have things to work on, and there's all ways that we can upgrade as individuals, right? That's just how our journey in life is. So take a minute, think about these things, digest what I've said to you today, and you know where to find me if you need help, okay? Chat with you soon, ladies.
Hey, if you enjoyed this podcast, you have to come check out my free weight loss class. It's the 5 steps to lasting weight loss, how hormones impact weight loss, and the truth about lasting weight loss without relying on willpower, workouts, or deprivation. Click the link in the show notes to watch that free class today. And if you are a woman over 35 with 20 to 50 or more pounds to lose, schedule a free weight loss breakthrough session with me after you watch that class. And let's talk about your 20 to 50 or more pound weight loss plan.